What's up, y'all? In today's video, I'll go over some performance tactics I like to use when playing beats live on the Roland P-6. Things like organizing your banks by sound type and beat, and some features that are fun to use when playing live like the step loop function and some MFX. There's a lot to cover, so let's check it out. If you plan on performing live at any point with the P-6, it's good to get into the habit of organizing your pads and banks when making beats. Using a consistent layout for your sounds helps you find sounds and stay in control of the arrangement. For my beats, I always try to keep the rhythm section on a single bank, so usually bank A or bank E, and the melodic parts on a different single bank, so it's easy to find things if I want to do mute outs. You can also see what banks have sounds playing on them by checking the bank buttons. The one you have selected will be lit up brightly, or it'll be blinking if you're on the other bank page. The buttons that have pads playing on them will be lit up faintly. And the banks that have no sounds on them won't be lit up at all. If you don't see any pads lighting up, try navigating to the other bank page by pressing the button for any bank twice. And the more beats you can save on the P-6, the more you can play in a live set, so I recommend using sample chains to save a high number of one-shots to a single pad, and then using sounds from those pads across multiple beats. This works well with drum samples like the snare, kick, or hi-hat, since you'll have a lot of sounds to choose from during the beat making process. And if you keep all those sample chain pads in one bank, you'll know exactly where to go to find your drum sounds if you want to mute them out. Check out my sample chain video for a deeper dive on how to create those. It's actually pretty easy. Okay, let's talk about performance tactics. The first is using mutes and unmutes to keep the beat dynamic. So there are two ways to mute and unmute pads on the P-6. The first is by holding Shift and then pressing one of the big sample pads, which will mute the pad if it's currently unmuted, or it'll unmute the pad if it's muted. The other way to mute and unmute pads is by holding Shift and then pressing one of the bank buttons. This will mute or unmute all the pads of that bank. And just like before, the bank buttons that are strongly lit up are unmuted, and the ones that are lit up faintly are muted. The bank mute is useful if you have pads organized in the way I mentioned earlier, since you can drop out the drums and then bring them back in very quickly. Another bonus for the bank mute is that you can activate it without even needing to be on the bank page for those sounds. It's also easy to use the pad mute and bank mute shortcuts simultaneously since they both use the Shift button. Additionally, you can unmute pads as the beat plays to introduce new melodic layers, so the arrangement builds up over time. I tend to have my patterns saved with a few layers muted for this. For example, in this beat, I start with this synth pad and bass unmuted, and then I have a few extra melodic layers muted, and as the pattern plays, I'll unmute those layers at various points to keep things moving. Another interesting performance tactic is using the step loop function. This allows you to have samples sequenced on specific steps re-trigger, so you can get sort of a beat repeat sound with it. To activate step loop mode, hold the Shift button down, and then press the pattern button. You can tell it's active because the pattern button will start blinking rapidly. With this active, as the pattern plays, I can press any step button down, and that step will repeat until I let go of the button. While the step is looping, any sample that was already playing will keep playing until it reaches its endpoint, and no other samples in the sequence will trigger, just the samples sequenced on the steps you have held down. But the sequencer is still running, so when you let go of that step button, the beat will resume playing from whatever point it's at. You can also press multiple step buttons down, and all of those steps will play in the loop. You can access the steps for other pages of your sequence by holding Shift and then pushing the page right or page left buttons. you have any steps that have no notes sequenced on them, those buttons will be unlit. So try to get a feel for which steps have cool sounds on them and experiment with holding them for certain periods of time for unexpected changes in the sequence. Another strategy for live performance is triggering vocal one-shots or effect sounds as your beat plays to keep things dynamic. You could save these sounds to a pad on the P-6, but I like using a separate device to trigger those, because that way you don't have to remember which bank the sounds are on and navigate there while managing other aspects of your performance. The P-033 pocket operator is pretty fun to use for this. But you could also use Qual Sampler from your phone, which connects really easily with the USB-C cable. And the last live performance strategy is using the built-in effects on the P-6 to change the sounds of your beats as they play. The P-6 has many of the SP404 effects, including those geared toward live performance. So here are a few that stand out to me. So the filter is great for, of course, filter sweeps. Knob 1 controls the cutoff frequency, so you can turn that knob to get a nice sweep effect. The looper is a good performance tool for getting a beat repeat effect. Knob 1 controls how tight the loop is, so move this left if you want it wider, or move it right if you want it shorter. And then turning knob 3 activates the loop. After you activate it, you can turn knob 1 again to get this interesting pitch screw sound. Delay is a good one for ending your set, or if you're quick enough for switching to your next beat. Try setting knob 1, the sync, to something short, like 1/16. Then bring knob 2, the feedback, to 70 or 80, and then set knob 3, the level, to 100. Then activate the effect and right after, quickly stop the pattern as kind of a fade out. The isolator in the MFX menu is a flexible one since you can use it to gate specific frequencies, similar to the filter. So I have mine set as kind of a high-pass filter. Knob 1 is the low gain, which I have turned all the way to the left, and then I have knobs 2 and 3 turned up a little bit to get a small boost to the mids and the highs. And then you can activate the effect for a short period and then bring the bass back in by deactivating it. The stop effect, which is also in the MFX menu, is a nice tape stop effect. Like delay, you can use this to end your set or finish playing one of your beats. And then one last tip on using effects. The P-6 has a way for you to disable certain pads from going to the effects bus, which is good if you want to target certain sounds with your effects but leave other sounds unaffected. You just have to hold the MFX button down and then press the big sample pads to exclude them. So for example, I'll disable my drum sounds on bank A from going to the effect bus, so the drums will continue to play after I activate the filter effect and do a filter sweep. You can also disable the line in or USB input from going to the effects bus with a quick shortcut. For the line input, you hold the MFX button down and then press the lo-fi button. And then for the USB input, hold MFX down and press the gate button. When it says EFH, it means the effects are applied to the sounds coming from that input source. And if it says bus A, that means the effect bus is skipped and no effects are applied. So that's my approach to live performances on the P-6 and some tactics I like to use. But if there's anything you find helpful or like to do when you're playing beats live, definitely drop it in the comments. And that does it for this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.